The municipality of Central Elgin acknowledges that it is located on the land of the McKee Treaty that was signed by the Wyandot and Anishinaabe nations, including ancestors of Chippewas of the Thames First Nation. It is also the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Attawandaronk, and Mississauga Nation. These First Nations continue to provide ongoing stewardship of the land and waters of the municipality of Central Elgin. Council, any disclosures of pecuniary interest, please? Seeing none, if I could get a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the minutes. Deputy Mayor Noble, Councillor Watson.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Watson, that the minutes for the regular meeting of Council dated October 28th, 2024, special meeting of Council dated November 5th, 2024, and special meeting of Council dated November 18th, 2024 be adopted.
Questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. We have a delegation with us this evening I'd like to introduce. This is under the heading of Unionary Environmental Assessment. We have Jeff Paul, the Managing Senior Principal from Stantec, who's in attendance and will provide a presentation regarding sanitary servicing for Union. Mr. Paul, please come forward and welcome.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, thank you for having me tonight. Obviously, thanks for the introduction. I'm from Stantec. Our job this evening is to talk about the servicing of Union. As you can see from the image taken from the official plan, there is some substantial growth potential here in Union. So our task was to look at the servicing, come up with the most cost-effective and best servicing alternative for this growing community. Next slide, please. So as far as an agenda goes, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the previous study that Stantec did in 2021, so kind of catch everyone up to date on what's been done in the past. We're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to talk a fair bit about the addendum that we're working on right now, because we are addending the previous EA with our solution. And as we work through that addendum, we work through some servicing alternatives. So I'm going to talk to you about the alternatives that we looked at. We're going to go through the decision matrix and how we decided what the best alternative was in terms of our preferred alternative. We're going to talk a little bit about some next steps, and then we'll do some questions and discussion. Next slide, please. So 2021 Class EA. So Stantec did this study, obviously, in 2021. And we looked at the servicing of Union in terms of both existing development, but mostly from the growth perspective. This drawing here, it's a little small, so it's a little hard to see all the details here, but essentially what we did for Union is we looked at what is the best layout of sewers and pumping stations to service this community. So what we ended up with was a central pumping station, which is located at Sparta Line and Sunset Drive. So you can see that sort of in the middle of that little yellow square. Gravity sewers emanating from there. So most of Union discharges to that pumping station, sort of centrally located in Union. And then over on the west side, over by Bostwick Road, there was a second pumping station there. There is a little bit of a divide with the creek, so that area is a little harder to service with that central pumping station. So there's a second pumping station over at Bostwick and Sparta Line, which pumps into the gravity sewers on Sparta Line. That in turn goes to the pumping station centrally located in Union. We refer to that as pumping station number 1. So essentially, everything in Union is collected and brought to that pumping station centrally located in Union. Next slide, please. So from there, our previous study in 2021 said, okay, how do we then get the flows from there to a treatment facility? In this case, our solution was to get it to the Port Stanley wastewater treatment plant. So the solution that we came up with at that time was to pump the flows via force main, south on Sunset Drive, brought us down to the existing sewer system on Sunset Drive. So the existing sewer system goes basically as far as East Road. And from there, the existing system basically conveyed those flows to the Port Stanley wastewater treatment plant. There's obviously gravity sewers that go down from Sunset Drive from East Road. through the existing community of Port Stanley to the existing pumping station number 51, and then pumping station number 51 pumps via force main up to the Port Stanley plant. So essentially in 2021, we concluded that in terms of servicing of Union, the constructed work she would have to do was obviously the sewers and the pumping stations we talked about in Union, the force main then to connect to the existing sewers in Port Stanley, and from there, existing infrastructure would convey those flows to the Port Stanley wastewater plant. Next slide, please. So following the conclusion of the 2021 study, a few things happened. There was a little bit more growth potential and a little bit more, I would say that the pace of growth was a little accelerated in Union, and there was a bit more study on the sewers in Port Stanley itself. So we started to look at, whereas we were connecting into those existing sewers, we started to look at, is there actually capacity in those sewers? Can they actually take the flows that we're looking at from Union? And, unfortunately, the conclusion was that on a theoretical basis, those sewers did not have the capacity for the massive development that we were looking at in Union. So if we went with the previous solution and connected to those existing sewers, then you were looking at some extensive sewer replacements through Port Stanley. So that really put us a little bit back to the drawing board in terms of, okay, how are we servicing Union? Should we change the servicing solution we came up with? One point I want to make on the slide as well is that the analysis that we did in conjunction with Central Elgin staff was looking on a theoretical basis at the sewers. So we make some assumptions about flows and how much flows each person generates and such. We come up with a theoretical assessment of the sewers. The one thing that we got into a discussion about was obviously theoretical and actual sometimes diverge. So one of the things that we did, or one of the things that staff proceeded with in the summer of 2024, was to install flow monitors in the sewer system to monitor actual flows. So we could then do a calibration of what is the actual flows in the sewer system. Is there some leftover capacity, and how much is that, and how much growth from Union can we accommodate in that sewer system? Next slide. So what did we do through the addendum process? So obviously, Central Elgin initiated this further study and looked at doing an addendum. Obviously, the previous study was done as a Class EA, so we had to go through this formal process of doing an addendum to the Class EA in order to change it. One of the things that was important to us was hearing from the developer stakeholders on servicing. So we had 2 meetings with developer stakeholders. The first was on June the 3rd of this year. Second was on September the 12th. The June the 3rd meeting was really at the very start of the addendum process. So we wanted to find out from the development community what things we should be considering as we were doing this study, what was important to the development community, so we could then take that into account as we made our decisions. One of the things that we heard really loud and clear was that any solution that we came up with should obviously be cost effective. That's always an outcome that we're always looking for, but that we should also consider phasing. We should also consider, could you do some initial phases of servicing at a lesser cost? You wouldn't be able to service the entirety of Union in so doing, but could you do a phased approach, allow some limited growth to occur, acknowledging that it may be a little slow at the start in Union, and there might, it might take some time to see that massive development grow. Could you do a phase where the first phase was more cost effective, and then as growth continued to occur, you go into a second phase of works, and thereby essentially just spread out the costs? The second meeting when we came back on September the 12th was basically we had worked through our analysis, we had come to a preferred alternative, and we brought that back to the development community just to test it, just to make sure that what we had come up with, met the needs of the development community. Obviously, it was primary that it met the needs of Central Elgin, and then bringing it forward to this meeting tonight. Yeah, and as we worked our way through the addendum, obviously what we were working through was looking at a variety of alternatives for the servicing Union, which I'll get into a little bit of detail now. Next slide. So What did we look at with the study? So we didn't look any further at how Union itself was serviced. So that one slide I showed you a little earlier that was really busy and a lot of information on it. We didn't change that servicing because that still works for Union itself. Our issue was, how do you get sanitary flows from Union to your Port Stanley wastewater treatment plant or some treatment facility? So that is essentially what we were focused on through this addendum. And we looked at several different alternatives of how to do that. So this first alternative we refer to as Route A2. This is essentially getting flows from Union to your Port Stanley wastewater treatment facility. And in this particular case, we run down Sunset Drive, we go through Port Stanley, we go into the existing pumping station number 51, but because of the magnitude of flows, pumping station number 51 wasn't large enough to take all of Union. So this would involve a reconstructed pumping station number 51. That station would take the flows from Union. It would also take the existing flows it's currently receiving from Port Stanley, repump it up to the Port Stanley wastewater treatment facility. Key with this alternative, and you're going to hear me mention this a few times, was this could be phased. So you could construct the pumping station in Union, do the servicing in Union. You could construct the force main as far as East Road, connect into the existing sewers, use whatever available capacity there is there. That would be your first phase, certain expenditure of money. And then you would implement the rest of the works. So the rest of the force main through Port Stanley, the new pumping station, and the force main to the wastewater treatment facility as a second phase of works. So you have that ability then to stage the works. Next slide. So this route, you're going to see this looks very, very similar to the previous slide. And really the only difference here is that we didn't rebuild pumping station number 51. So instead of sending the flows to pumping station number 51, rebuilding that station, you were sending flows right straight through Port Stanley. So it's basically force main all the way straight through Port Stanley, right up, up the hill and going to the Port Stanley wastewater treatment plant. Similar to the previous alternative, could also be phased, so it had some benefits there as well. Next slide. From there, we started looking at some other alternatives of trying to stay away from Port Stanley. So, looking at how do we route the force main. So very similar type of servicing, but instead of sending that force main south on Sunset Drive, now you're going west. You're going out Sparta Line. You're going through some of the rural roads. You're staying away from Port Stanley. You're coming around and you're coming into the Port Stanley plant from the west. So this, as you can see, very much a cross-country road. You've got, coming down Sparta, come across Sparta Line, Union Road, Coon Road, Scotch Line, and then you eventually make it to the Port Stanley facility. Key with this particular routing is you cannot phase now. You haven't gone to Port Stanley, so this would all have to be built as a single project in a single phase. Next slide. And then there's a little bit of a variation on a theme. This was, a bit of our attempt to try to have the best of all worlds, so to speak. So this is still sticking with the rural routing again, but instead of Sparta Line, we went to Roberts Line instead. So you've gone down Sunset Drive, out Roberts Line, similar routing as you saw on the previous slide. This one gave you a little bit of benefit in terms of phasing. So on an initial phase, you could, take your force main down Sunset Drive, and that first phase would then have an additional force main, a temporary force main, running down Sunset Drive as far as East Road, connect into the sewers there. That's your first phase. Second phase, you build all the rest of it. You go Roberts Line, you go over to Coon Road and Scotch Line, and work your way around to the treatment plant. So this still gave you the ability to phase, but it is still, and as you can see from some of these images, this is a much longer force main length than some of the slides that you've seen previously. Next slide, please. And then we dusted off this alternative. This was something we had considered in the original 2021 EA, was building a whole separate wastewater treatment facility strictly for Union. What we've shown here is really a very approximate location of that facility. This will require quite a bit more study to determine where that wastewater treatment facility would actually go. But we did want to take a look at this and just, as we said internally, leave no stone unturned in terms of our looking at alternatives. So similar to previous alternatives, we're running down Sunset Drive. We're going to an assumed location of a wastewater treatment facility. Again, similar to previous alternatives, this could be phased again. You could connect to the existing sewers, and you could use the capacity that was available in those existing sewers. Next slide. So we had those 5 alternatives. We ran it through a decision matrix to make the decision as to what is the best alternative. And I'm not going to read this whole slide because there's lots of words on here, but the slide is really in here intended that if you did want a little bit more detail on the decision process, it's in here. If you want to drill further into the decision-making process, there is an actual report that goes into it in more detail. Obviously, I'm here to answer questions if you want to ask today. But really what I really wanted to convey with this slide and the next one is that in making the decision, we run it through a couple of different filters, or that we sort of look at this from a matrix approach. So we look at social and cultural features and social cultural impacts, in particular in this regard. What are our impacts on Port Stanley? If we're going through Port Stanley, what does that impact in terms of existing residents and businesses? What's the impact of building a new wastewater treatment facility? What's the social impacts of those sorts of things? Look at the natural environment impacts. So what impacts are we having on the natural environment with all of these various routings? For the most part, most of these routings, as you saw, follow existing roads. Those impacts are relatively minor, with the exception of course, alternative 5. Building a new wastewater treatment facility does have a much larger environmental impact. Next slide, please. And then the last criterion, which always gets lots of press, but I don't want to diminish the previous couple of categories, is technical and economic review. So we cost all these alternatives. So we look at it from terms of a capital cost, and then we also give some consideration to what are the long-term operation and maintenance considerations. And also, is the system technically complicated? What's the complexity and what's the difficulties that the operators may have using this system? Again, I don't want to go through this in great detail and expend your time that way, but just to say that we did end up with option A3 as the recommended preferred alternative. What you do see with that alternative is that it has a relatively low phase 1 cost. That's actually fairly constant across most of the alternatives. So you can implement the phase 1 for $8.4 million. But the phase 2 is one of the cheaper alternatives. And this is really the fact of that, actually, if you just go to the next slide for a moment, what you really see here when you consider this in terms of other alternatives is it's just the shortest distance. Shortest distance between 2 points is running through Port Stanley. It does have some impact on the Port Stanley area, but it is a force main, so we can keep that impact to a minimum. We're not rebuilding pumping station number 51, which has a larger impact. But at the end of the day, this is just a much shorter route. The distance from the Union pumping station, the proposed Union station, to the Port Stanley wastewater facility is about 6 kilometers. For comparison, when we started to look at some of those other cross-country alternatives, we went out Sparta Line or we went out Roberts Line, we were in the 10, almost 11 kilometer range. So that drives both the costs up, drives some of the energy costs up in terms of operation and maintenance. It also makes operation and maintenance a little more difficult because the longer sewage sits in a force main, it starts to go septic. So you start to have some operational concerns there. So this is the recommended preferred alternative that we're bringing forward this evening. Again, this involves that centrally located pumping station in Union at the intersection of Sparta Line and Sunset Drive. Force main down Sunset Drive. Again, you could do a phase 1 by connecting into the existing sewers at East Road and Sunset Drive. So you could service an initial few phases of Union off of that. And then your second phase of works would carry those force mains through Port Stanley, across the Warren Street Bridge, and bring you out to the Port Stanley wastewater treatment facility. Next slide. So in terms of next steps, so we have worked our way through this analysis, obviously bringing that here this evening. There is a draft report that I believe is available to council. So with council's endorsement, then we would finalize that report. So we would file it for public review. It goes on the public record for 30 days for public comment. In conjunction with that, we will then be reviewing some of the flow monitoring data that we've collected. We've already looked at this, so it's not like we've been collecting this data since summer. We have a fair bit of data. There's some good wet weather events because you get some interesting things happen when it rains. So we've looked at it, but we haven't done a thorough analysis of it yet. So we'd be doing that more detailed analysis to really pin down what we feel the available flow is for that phase one development for Union. And of course, we would leave that with Central Elgin staff and council to make some determinations on how you want to set your DC rates for Union and make financing arrangements for the construction of both the phase one and phase two works. Next slide. And that's all that I have this evening, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. I think we've got a couple of questions. First, the Deputy Mayor, you had a question?
Yes, through you, Mayor Sloan. How would the sewer rates be affected with the potential sewer being put in Union? Like currently, we do quite a few studies and come up with what the sewer costs are going to be to the residents. And if we take on this construction to put these sewers in Union, how will that affect our current users?
Microphone.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our recommendation obviously is the capital cost of constructing these works would be paid through development charges. So you're collecting those development charges as you're building houses. So the capital cost would be paid for that way. Generally, the way most municipalities set their sewer rate is that it scales based on users. So you are expanding your system, you are increasing the actual operation cost of your system, but at the same time, theoretically, you're bringing in more users at the same time. So it should balance itself out in that regard.
Are we follow up? Okay. So can you explain to me what happened between 21 and 24? And then if we're going to shoot up to 2027, whenever these houses are built, so that would be 3 years, what might change in the future?
So yeah, I think what, and I wasn't part of the original 2021 study, but I think what I understand was that there was an understanding or a belief that there was sewer capacity when that study was done, and also that the growth potential for Union was much less. So when that initial study was done, I think there was a lot less development pressure in Union. So as we advanced sort of to 2023, 2024, there was much greater development pressure. That's when we started to look more carefully at the existing sewer system and saying, okay, is this sewer system going to absorb all of that growth potential that we're seeing in Union? And that's what's caused us to sort of look back at this again. In terms of going forward, this solution really solves that issue. You're not reliant upon existing infrastructure. Well, you are for your phase one, but you're not reliant on existing infrastructure in terms of a total build out of Union. So you wouldn't have to necessarily study this again unless some of your conditions changed in terms of if you had some other growth that was happening somewhere else. If you decided that you did want to upgrade pumping station number 51 at some point, those would be things that you might want to restudy it, but the growth potential in Union wouldn't change the solution that we're recommending.
Thank you. Council? Good. Deputy Mayor, please.
Would there be a benefit to having that second sewage plant? Because the savings is like $9.5 million. And if we had to do renovations or whatever to the wastewater treatment plant that we have in Port Stanley now, that could probably take on some of the extra flows if there was something that had to happen there. But it's also $9.5 million savings by having that extra facility. I realize there'd be some extra costs, but can't help but look at that.
I have to agree with you there. That was one that we struggled with because I don't lightly recommend building a second wastewater treatment facility, but the price tag is attractive. I think what we struggled with ourselves in terms of bringing that forward as the recommended preferred alternative is just the massive development in Union. It's a small community to absorb the burden of an additional wastewater treatment facility. So the capital cost being, one piece of it, you've also got some additional operation and maintenance burden. So you've now got a second treatment facility. There's also quite a bit of study that would have to go into it to determine whether you could locate another facility there. We're not even positive that you could, because you'd have to look at the assimilative capacity of Kettle Creek. You'd have to look at available land in the area. So at the end of the day, it was really a matter of, for a development potential the size of Union, it just didn't make sense to us to recommend a second wastewater treatment facility. The other piece that I guess we worried about a little bit was in conjunction with talks with staff, was whether you might end up in a situation where you're building that facility, and it's a fairly large price tag, as you saw, like 22 million, but would you have to also expand the Port Stanley wastewater treatment plant as well? Would development in Port Stanley also be causing an expansion of the Port Stanley plant so that you might end up with the burden of two facilities at the same time?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Mayor Sloan, I was under the understanding when we talked about this maybe 6 or 8 months ago that the treatment plant for Port Stanley had enough capacity for Union and the planned growth for Port Stanley. So I'm not sure where that kind of comes in, that was my understanding anyways.
Mr. Brooks, did you want to comment?
Through you, Mayor Sloan, I was just going to expand upon Jeff's answer in regards to the building the new plant. And, a lot of what we consider with building a new plant is capital costs to construct the new plant versus ongoing maintenance costs that will be saddled by the existing users. So, while it might be somewhat a little bit cheaper to construct that plant at an initial capital cost, you're going to have those ongoing additional maintenance costs, maintenance and operating costs that will never go away. So at some point in time, that cost will exceed the initial capital cost of the second plant.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Sir, go ahead.
Maybe one additional point I'll make as well that Jeff and I had discussed at one point, because we did talk a fair bit about should we go to an additional plant, and that wasn't something we dismissed lightly. But the other thing that I find interesting is that you're always going to be better to have one consolidated facility as much as is possible. There's always going to be points where you're going to say, you know what, it's better to have multiple facilities. But as much as is possible, centralizing is always the best choice, partly for operational maintenance things, as Jeff has alluded to. The other part is that you get to pool your available capacity. So it's always, so that excess capacity that's available for growth is always pooled because it's in a singular facility. As soon as you start to build multiple facilities, you have to make sure that both facilities have excess capacity. And those are situations where you sometimes run out of capacity at one plant. You're expanding that plant when you actually have excess capacity at your other plant.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Very thorough presentation. We appreciate you coming. If that's it, I don't see any other questions or comments from council, so I appreciate your time, and we will move along. Report, Central Elgin Planning Office, CEP 3924, application for draft plan of condominium approval, Compass Trail, Domus Developments. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Bachman, Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Bogman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Noble, that the proposed draft plan of condominium for 62 Compass Trail in the village of Port Stanley be supported, and that a resolution of support be provided to the County of Elgin requesting the following condition it be included in the county's decision: that the applicant be required to enter into a vacant land condominium agreement with the municipality of Central Elgin.
Questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. CAO 2024 from the Chief Administrative Officers, the council meeting schedule. If I could get a mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Watson, thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Watson, that the 2025 Municipality of Central Elgin Council Schedule attached to Schedule A to Report CAO 2024 be approved, and that the 2025 Municipality of Central Elgin Council Schedule be communicated to partners and stakeholders and posted to the municipal website.
Questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. CAO 2124, Indemnification Bylaw. Deputy Mayor. Councillor Connors.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Connors, that an indemnification bylaw be adopted as attached to Schedule A to Staff Report CAO 2124.
Questions or comments? Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Mayor, could we make this retroactive to the beginning of our term?
Ms. Hurd.
Through the mayor to the deputy mayor, as outlined in my report, should council choose to make the bylaw effective at the beginning of your term, that will capture any matters that had taken place between the beginning of your term and today's date.
Questions or comments?
I'm happy to amend my motion if that's possible. I think I have to do that.
Ms. Leach. Councillor Griffin, did you have a question?
Thank you. Yes. So if we make this retroactive, I saw that it does include any investigative body. Would that mean that it includes integrity and legal that's used for those purposes?
Ms. Hurd.
Through the mayor to Councillor Griffin, yes, as outlined in the bylaw, yes, it would.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have another question, Councillor Griffin?
Nope. Let me just see about taking that down. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Leach.
Mayor Sloan, I note that we have an amendment moved by the Deputy Mayor that the proposed bylaw take effect as of December 5th, 2022.
Vote on the amendment, please. We need a seconder. Oh, Councillor Connors, thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the amendment reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Connors, that the proposed bylaw take effect as of December 5th, 2022.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Original as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Director of Infrastructure and Community Services, ICS 5824, request for tenders, building condition audits. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Connors, sorry.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Connors, that the building condition audits project to BLDG Sci Advisory Inc. be approved for a total value of $51,500, excluding HST, to be funded from reserves.
Questions or comments? Councillor Watson, please.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, to Mr. Brooks. Do they do bridges too?
Mr. Brooks, please.
Through you, Mayor Sloan, to Councillor Watson, no, they specialize in building audits.
I think we've got a mover and a seconder. So all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Consent agreement 380 Edith Cavell Boulevard. If I could get a mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor. I need a seconder. Councillor Watson, thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Watson, that the mayor and deputy clerk be authorized to sign the consent agreement for 380 Edith Cavell Boulevard.
Questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Jacqueline Farms Phase 4 development. Mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Watson, thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Watson, that the mayor and deputy clerk be authorized to sign the development agreement for Jacqueline Farms Phase 4.
Any questions on this, folks? Councillor Connors, please.
Just a comment on this. For the last 2 years at my town halls, we've been discussing a secondary entrance to this subdivision. And so far, we've gone to the province, and I know that internally, we've gone to the developer with no success to this point. But something to keep in mind, obviously, there was some sort of a mistake made by someone in, prior to us being here that didn't allow for a secondary entrance to this subdivision. I would caution people that it's on people's radar now, and going forward, any subdivisions that are being considered should have a secondary entrance.
Thank you, Councillor Connors. Deputy Mayor Noble.
Through you, Mayor. So I guess with that question being asked, how many houses are actually going in this subdivision, and is there a second entrance or exit?
Councillor Connors.
The final count will be in and around the 500 mark, which Jeff Brooks had indicated to me some time ago. I thought it was going to be quite higher than that.
Thank you, Councillor Connors and Deputy Mayor. I'll ask Mr. Brooks, please.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Sloan, just a correction, the total build out of the subdivision as a whole will be somewhere between 450 and 500 total units. And I apologize, Deputy Mayor Noble, I don't have the exact number of lots going in as part of this phase, but this phase is connected to the existing phase utilizing that primary entrance off of McBain.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, if I could get, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. Just before we get to the next piece for the Pleasant Valley Bridge, I would like to ask those that are here to join me in welcoming our new Director of Finances and Municipal Treasurer, David Jansen. Mr. Jansen is a chartered professional accountant with over 30 years of progressive business experience. Most recently, he was the Chief Financial Officer of the Middlesex London Health Unit. His working experience includes not-for-profit, municipal government, corporate, and manufacturing. Sir, we welcome you and we look forward to working with you. Item ICS 6824, Pleasant Valley Bridge. If I could get a mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Connors, thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Connors, that R.J. Burnside be awarded engineering work for the Pleasant Valley Line Bridge at a cost of $74,950, excluding HST, to be funded from the Bridge Capital Reserve, and that the Director of Financial Services and Treasurer be authorized to sign a client service agreement with R.J. Burnside.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. Mover and I got the mover and seconder, so we're going to go to questions. Sorry. Councillor Connors to start.
Yes, through you, Mayor Sloan. R.J. Burnside, is he a consultant at $74,950?
Yes, R.J. Burnside is a fairly large engineering consultant in Ontario.
Supplementary, go ahead, please, sir.
So the estimated costs, I mean, have we received these costs from any firm as of yet? Because you have different costs here. I'm wondering if someone has put these bids in front of you, Have you gone out for pricing on it, or are you waiting for Burnside to make some sort of a specification before you can go out for tender?
Sir?
Through you, Mayor Sloan, staff have done a fair amount of background work on what the repair costs to the bridge would be. And the repair costs that you see in the report were as a result of reaching out to the bridge manufacturer and pricing out the actual materials to make the repairs. Now, there's a number of different options that council could consider as a repair. But what we did is we took the general rule of thumb is material times 2. So we took material times 2.25 to just build in a little bit of a buffer. Now, that's just a guess at what the repair cost to the bridge would be. RJ Burnside, if awarded the engineering work, as part of their work, they would prepare a design brief that could be presented at council to provide the different detailed options that council has in front of it to consider as part of a repair. We've laid out 4 different options that council could consider just based on high-level estimated pricing. RJ Burnside would be able to drill that down, speak to whether or not there's repairs required to any of the concrete abutments, that sort of thing, and further drill down exactly what those costs are so that council could make a more informed decision if it takes the route in moving forward with repairs.
Thank you. Can I just jump in before you, Councillor Connors? So it looks like one of the options, Mr. Brooks, is approximately $500,000. How long does that get us? I mean, we did some work on this bridge within the last 5 years, correct?
Yeah, we did back in 2017, 2018, we did repair some stringer sets and 1 transom. For this repair, we would be looking at replacing the remainder, all the stringer sets, all the transoms, but that $500,000 estimate that I had would reuse the side trusses there. So with that $500,000 repair, we could expect an additional lifespan of approximately 25 years.
And just on that, Jeff, or Mr. Brooks, is it, you know, if you look at 25 years and it's exactly the same as it was, are there enhancements that can be made to make it 50 years, i.e. one-way, weight distribution, all that kind of stuff? Just we're learning through this and I find it interesting. Thank you.
I think, you know, with the existing steel trusses, they're 40 years old already. So we're contemplating reuse of those trusses. So you're likely only going to get another 25 years out of there, regardless of any restrictions that you place on those trusses. However, RJ Burnside will be able to assess whether or not, you know what, if we're replacing most of the structure, let's have a look at replacing the trusses as well, and maybe we'll gain a 50-year lifespan out of that. It may cost X amount more dollars, but they'll have that in the design brief so that council can make that decision at that time. A lot of it depends on, you know, how much work would be required to reinforce those concrete abutments.
Thank you. I have Councillor Graham and then, or Councillor Connors. I'm going to let Councillor Graham as her first question, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Jeff, how much did we spend in 2018 on this bridge?
My apologies. The municipality spent approximately $200,000 on repair costs in 2018.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Graham.
Did we look at alternate types of bridges to see if it's viable, to see if it's cheaper?
Mr. Brooks.
At the time, we didn't have a look at any alternative bridge types. I would suggest that the Bailey Bridge that we're utilizing on Pleasant Valley Line now is likely the cheapest bridge that you can put in place there. It's a modular type construction. You know, as indicated in the report, it was brought about through the Second World War in order for troops to cross bridges overseas. So, you know, that modular type is probably the cheapest alternative that we have. A more permanent structure, then you're starting to get into a multi-million-dollar project.
Thank you. Councillor Connors, please.
Through you, Mayor. Mr. Brooks, I imagine that we need Burnside involved because there's stamped drawings and submissions that have to be met for protocol reasons for getting a building permit or a permit to do the work. taking that out of the equation, is there any way that the bridge manufacturers would have a structural engineer on staff, or one of the bidders that we would have engineering people on staff that could do these drawings, stamp and submit them for a building permit, or those, let's face it, the truth of the matter here is that this bridge does serve people in Central Elgin, and we are obliged to repair it. But there's not a lot of people that are involved here, and I'm just wondering, spending this kind of money, how low can we get it? And that's why I'm kind of drilling on this and asking these questions, because if we can save the $75,000, then I'm all for that.
Thank you. Mr. Brooks, please.
Staff specifically asked that question of the manufacturer, and the answer was no. They wouldn't have anyone on staff that would prepare design drawings for us. Again, it's more than just replacing part for part. We need to take a look at the concrete abutments, bearing capacities of those, and the long-term viability of those concrete abutments as well, in which this consulting engineer can help us out with.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, did you have a comment, question?
Through you, Mayor Sloan. So with the option 3 and option 4 with a new bridge, does that include new concrete abutments there, Jeff?
Sir?
No, that's just the material costs multiplied by 2.25. So that's where we need the engineer in place to help. Is it even viable to go with that option based on the current conditions of the structure that's in place now?
Okay, so question, Councillor Watson, please, sir.
Yes, through you, Mayor Sloan to Jeff. You said it could cost option 1, $500,000, and that's with a fudge factor of 2.25. So could it actually cost about $250,000 just for the parts?
Sir?
Through Mayor Sloan, I believe
Sorry, microphone.
through you, Mayor Sloan, the cost of the materials, I believe, was in and around $215,000. So, that's what your material cost is straight from the manufacturer. So,
Thanks. Follow up, sir?
Through you, Mayor. I'd just like to make a comment. I'd just like to get on with it and get this done let's see where it takes us, 250,000. And if we need more, we'll throw more at it. Those people need that bridge down there.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments? The recommendation we have is that we'll go forward with for the Pleasant Valley Bridge at the cost of $74,950 to be funded from the Bridge Capital Reserve. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Griffin, did you vote, please? Or did I miss you?
Yes, I voted in favor. It may have lagged a little bit.
Apologies. Thank you.
Thanks.
That passes.
We have a recorded vote, please.
Okay, recorded vote requested. Ms. Leach, please.
Councillor Graham,
No.
Councillor Griffin,
Yes.
Councillor Watson,
No.
Councillor Connors,
No.
Councillor Bogman,
No.
Deputy Mayor Noble,
Yes?
Mayor Sloan.
No.
That's defeated.
Moving on to the bylaws. You have an addendum, I believe, someday Councillor, Ms. Leach.
Mayor Sloan, I would note per council's direction on the report regarding the indemnification bylaw, an amendment would be required to bylaw 2939 with the effective date to be removed and replaced with December 5th, 2022.
Okay, so we'll get a mover and a seconder for the rest of the bylaws first. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Connors.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Connors, that bylaws 2933, 2934, 2935, 2936, 2937, 2938, and 2941 be taken collectively.
Councillor Graham.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a request that bylaw 2934 be separated.
Ms. Leach.
Is there a seconder for the amended motion?
Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Mayor, just for clarification, that's the fencing bylaw, right? Thank you.
My apologies, Your Worship. Just looking to clarify whether the Deputy Mayor seconded the motion to amend.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Leach.
Okay, we'll need a vote on that amendment.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
So, Your Worship, the motion as amended would be that bylaws 2933, 2935, 2936, 2937, 2938, and 2941 be taken collectively.
Mover and a seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Watson, thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Watson, that bylaws 2933, 2935, 2936, 2937, 2938, and 2941 be taken collectively.
All those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. Now, I need a mover and a seconder for 2934 separately, correct, Ms. Leach?
Mayor Sloan, I would propose that the bylaws taken collectively be considered, and then we will move on to those that were separated.
Mover and a second to take them collectively.
Your Worship, just to clarify, that motion was for the listed bylaws to be taken collectively, and now a motion is required for them to be read a first, second, third time, and finally passed.
Thank you. If I get a mover and a seconder for that motion, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Connors, thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Connors, that bylaws 2933, 2935, 2936, 2937, 2938, and 2941 be read a first, second, third time, and finally passed.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Mover and a seconder for 2934, is that correct, Ms. Leach?
Yes, it is, sir.
Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor, or Deputy Mayor, did you? Councillor Bachmann. Do I need a seconder, Ms. Leach, or was that Councillor Graham when she first asked for the amendment?
Your Worship, we will require a seconder for.
Thank you. I
this
have
one.
Councillor Bachmann as a motion. I need a seconder. Councillor Griffin? Thank you.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Bachmann, seconded by Councillor Griffin, that bylaw 2934 be read a first, second, third time, and finally passed.
All those in favor? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Watson? Call the vote, please. Call the vote, Ms. Leach.
Councillor Graham,
Opposed?
Councillor Griffin,
Yes.
Councillor Watson,
No.
Councillor Connors,
No.
Councillor Bachmann,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Noble,
No.
Mayor Sloan.
Yes.
That's defeated.
So the other amendment, can I get a mover and a seconder for the amended bylaw 2939, please? So I need Councillor Connors and the Deputy Mayor, please.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Connors, seconded by Deputy Mayor Noble, that bylaw 2939 be amended with the effective date to be removed and replaced with December 5th, 2022.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
Mayor Sloan, we just need a motion to read and pass bylaw 2939. My apologies.
Mover and a seconder, please. Okay, so we have the Deputy Mayor and we have Councillor Connors.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Deputy Mayor Noble, seconded by Councillor Connors, that bylaw 2939 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed as amended.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Sloan. I'll turn the mic over to you to speak to the motion.
Thank you to the Deputy Mayor. The notice of motion that I've put forth has to do with the increased cost of OPP services for Central Elgin. As some of you might know, the Central Elgin is contractually obligated with the OPP for the remainder of 2025. And when our annual billing statement from the OPP to the municipality came, it has an increase of 30% in the cost for services. No new services. It's to deal with a price adjustment from salaries. This cost alone would translate through to the taxpayer or ratepayer at approximately 4.1%. And there was no warning. We're dealing with a municipal council that 1% to our bottom line is approximately $170,000. This council's been quite diligent in looking at numbers over the last 2 years. To say it was a shock would be an understatement. And I'm asking for support with respect to making the case that it's not tenable for a jurisdiction the size of Central Elgin to go forward with that kind of an increase. So I'm asking my council colleagues to consider, first of all, I need a seconder before I go forward so that we can show our municipalities the strength of council behind a letter we write or ongoing discussions Ms. Hurd might make. And you'll probably see in the media that other jurisdictions have done this, but I think it's very serious. I think, our new Director of Finance can attest that this is a bit of a hit to our system. And at the end of the day, I thought it was important for me as mayor to bring forward this notice of motion.
Councillor Halpin, did you have your hand up to second that motion? Okay. Councillor Griffins, apologies. Questions? Councillor Connors?
Through you, Chair. I don't know what this contract looks like. I've never seen the agreement that we have in place with the OPP. But for the last, I don't know how many years, you've said here the average increase is 3%. In some contracts, there's limiting factors that will say, whatever the percentage is attached to CPI or a maximum of 3% or a maximum of 10%. Is there any such language that we have in our agreement with the OPP?
Go ahead.
I'm going to defer to Ms. Hurd, please.
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Connors, And the agreement that council passes is through bylaw, each contract. So you will have had access to that agreement. However, when the OPP did provide us with the information in October, there was no what's the word I want to say? Not warning, but there was no notice of the increase that's taking place. We did receive supplementary material in regards to the costs because municipalities are charged per call. However, it is the increase, from what I understand, the increase to the policing contract, their own union negotiations that are really driving the higher costs.
Which is,
Mayor Sloan, did you want to respond to that? Okay. Councillor Bachman, you had a question?
While I agree that the increases are exorbitant, 30% is something that it's tough to wrap your head around, but what are the alternatives?
Ms. Hurd?
Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Bachman, at this time, many municipalities across Ontario have raised these concerns because we are not alone with the extreme increases. Some municipalities have chosen to challenge. There is a challenge process through I believe, the contract where you can dispute the charge. In this case, I believe that what Mayor Sloan's intent is to provide a letter of concern to our Solicitor General to join the voices, many voices across Ontario of the increases in hopes that the province may take some action regarding it. I know ROMA, the Rural Ontario Municipal Board, association has taken this matter to their board, and I know that they're advocating on municipalities' behalf as well.
Councillor Connors?
You, Chair. I support that 110%. And, if we allow this to go through at whatever the percentage is, what does it say to other people that service us? Who's going to be next at a 30% increase? So I think we need to stand up and fight this.
Councillor Watson?
Yes, through you, Chair, to Mayor Sloan. This is a very bold move, and I really do appreciate you identifying this cost increase and bringing it to everybody's attention. And I fully support your motion to take this to the higher levels to see if they're going to help us pay for this. It's not right, so thank you very much.
Anyone else? Ms. Leach, can we have is there a motion?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, the motion reads, moved by Mayor Sloan, seconded by Councillor Griffin, whereas across the province, municipalities serviced by the Ontario Provincial Police are experiencing significant increases in the cost of utilizing the province's police services in 2025, including municipalities across Elgin County. Whereas the municipality of Central Elgin has a contract with the OPP for the delivery of police services in Central Elgin, and the historical increases have averaged 3% for OPP annual billing. Whereas the OPP submitted their 2025 annual billing statement to the municipality of Central Elgin on October 4th, 2024, that identifies a $656,890 or 30% increase in the cost for services, which includes a $254,269 price adjustment from 2023 and results in a 4.1% budgeted tax levy increase. Whereas the municipality was not consulted or provided any advance notice from the commissioner regarding the significant cost increase received for OPP services, whereas the unexpected increase cannot be absorbed by the municipality without impacting our taxpayers. Now therefore be it resolved that the municipality requests that the 2025 OPP annual billing statement be reduced to an approximate 3% increase that is more manageable for the municipality and in line with historical trends, that any increase above 3% be absorbed by the province as the additional costs are financially unsustainable for municipalities and within the control of the OPP, and that a copy of the resolution be provided to the Honourable Michael Kersner, Solicitor General, the Honourable Rob Flack, MPP for Elgin, Middlesex, London, the County of Elgin, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario.
All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Motion number 2, insulating the Port Stanley Visitor Center. Councillor Graham, did you wish to speak to this?
So we had a recent Port Stanley Village Association survey that came back with the majority. Well, it was the number one issue was the lack of washrooms, clean washrooms, and permanent four-season washrooms in the Port Stanley area. It's been an issue for a very long time. The visitor center isn't insulated from what Mr. Brooks tells me. So what I'm asking is that staff, we're not making any decisions tonight, but that staff investigate and report back to us with cost and feasibility for an option of insulating the visitor center so that we can have year-round four-season washrooms. Just because there are a lot of people, obviously, still tourists. We're a four-season town. So a lot of tourists during the fall and winter that have no access to any washrooms there. So that's the first notice.
Questions or comments? Deputy Mayor, please, and then Councillor. Oh, I'm sorry, I need a seconder. Apologies. Seconder, you're seconding? Okay.
Through you, Mayor Sloan, is there a need in that investigation, the ongoing cost to maintain that at the same time?
I believe it'll contain all costs. So maintenance costs, what the initial cost would be.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Brooks. Why wasn't it done at the original time? It was a cost issue, I take it, sir?
It was determined that time that it would be a seasonal facility and that it would be closed down in the wintertime. So there is some insulation there. However, some of the piping up in the ceiling would need to be insulated, and there would be some additional measures that would have to take place as well.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Hurd, please.
Through the mayor to members of council, I just want to make sure that council understands, in addition to the cost of insulating the building through the budget process, you will also be receiving the impact of operating costs. So in terms of cleaning the facility as well. So both the capital and operating costs will be included in that in that business case.
Councillor Bachmann.
While I applaud Councillor Graham's initiatives representing her ward and taking the action, move forwarding on this, I'm wondering if we're putting the cart before the horse here when we're considering all of these suggestions she's brought forward for our 2025 budget, where in looking at this, we could all submit staff requests. And is this appropriate use of staff when we haven't even decided on what our capital budgets are going to be next year, what our capital expenses are going to be from the staff? We haven't received any of those recommendations. Yet we're putting staff's time and energies into researching all of this, which I commend Councillor Graham. I think, yeah, they definitely need to be looked into, but at what point? I don't think we're at that point yet. I think Port has received a lot of attention from our budget, and I would like to see, instead of all of us putting submissions forth and putting 10, 15, 20 suggestions to our staff to go research, that perhaps we identify where our needs are going to be in 2025 and then put staff to the action.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Griffin, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So actually, in the same vein, I really did appreciate how many motions came out here and in response to that survey. But of all of them, this one surprised me the most for a couple of different reasons. And one was that we already have, I mean, if you were looking, for example, to have washrooms available at the beaches, I understand that, whether or not I agree with it. But we have a library just on the other side of the bridge from this that is open year round. And having worked in library services, I saw people come in every single day for 10 years using it as a washroom because it is a publicly funded building that is open year round. And so I kind of wondered whether the complaints you're receiving from the community about washrooms are really about that central area not having, or if it is more at the beaches. And the other thing I didn't really understand here was, are we already investigating this, but Elgin is responsible for the staffing of the building? Because if that's the case, then it might be better if we find out whether in principle that's even something they're open to before we really dive into how much we want to spend to make these changes.
Thank you, Councillor Griffin. I believe we do the maintenance, but we rent to the Visitors Center to Elgin County. Ms. Hurd, is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes, that is correct. We do rent it to the County of Elgin, but our staff are do the maintenance and the cleaning of that facility.
Councillor Griffin?
Thank you. Yeah, so supplementary, is it going to be staffed in the winter, or will it just be an unstaffed building that people can come into?
Good question.
Through the mayor to Councillor Griffin, that is the purpose of this business case, is to look at those options and present them to council while you're considering all the many things that council will have to consider as part of the budget.
Questions or comments? Any further? Deputy Mayor, please.
Through you, Mayor, I don't know if staff can speak to the washrooms at the library. Is that a possibility? Is that something we have open in the winter that is available? And I also don't know what the hours are for a washroom. Like, I'm guessing we don't leave them open 24 hours a day, but maybe we do. So I'm wondering,
Mr. Brooks?
Through you, Mayor Sloan, the library is operated by the county, so we'd have to inquire with the county what the availability of the use of the washrooms there is.
Deputy Mayor, supplementary, please.
through you, Mayor Sloan, is there hours for the washrooms that are down on Big Beach?
In the summer.
During the summer, I believe the washrooms are opened at, I believe it's 9 a.m. and closed at 9 p.m.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Graham?
Just to clarify, we're talking about the shoulder months when the washrooms are closed at Big Beach and when the porta potties are all taken away, so that there's no public washrooms throughout the town during those months.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Seeing none, I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you. Now, Councillor Graham, we're back to you. Public washroom facility strategy.
And this runs on the tails of that because we're looking at, the idea was to take a look at the feasibility and costs of providing permanent washroom facilities, specifically in Little Beach during the summer months, because we just have porta potties down there. So the different options that staff can provide, and just find out what the costing is on those so they can come back to us and let us know which ones are more feasible.
Do you have a seconder, Councillor Graham? Councillor Connors.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Connors. Whereas the Waterfront Master Plan and the Harbor Secondary Plan identify the need for access to public washrooms and change facilities at Little Beach, Main Beach, Erie Rest Beach, and Hoffus Park. Whereas the municipality provides public washroom facilities at all three beach areas and Hoffus Park from May to October. Whereas the public is requesting access to public washrooms year-round and/or additional cleaning for the existing portable washrooms. Whereas providing these facilities and/or additional cleanings may require both capital and operating investments by the municipality. Now therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to investigate improvements for public washroom facilities at Little Beach, Main Beach, Erie Rest Beach, and the Hoffus Park area, and to consider both the operating and capital costs associated with the following levels of service: status quo being portable washrooms, status quo with increased cleaning, also portable washrooms, permanent washroom facility seasonal access from May to October, permanent washroom facility for season, expanding or reconstructing the Main Beach washroom facilities, converting 115 William Street into a washroom facility, and that the findings be presented to council for the 2025 budget consideration.
Well, we've got a lot of information on washrooms tonight. So, Mr. Brooks, when it comes to outdoor washrooms in the winter, what's the Central Elgin's policy been to date, please? And before you answer, I know we take them out of parks, right? So I'm just thinking aloud here. We've got our parks and they're in from approximately May to October. So if we're going to switch Port Stanley's to year-round with porta potties, does that also then mean that the parks we have in everyone's ward would also want them for the winter? So if you just give me a bit of a background on what's happened to date so that we can help with our decision, please.
Yes, so through in the parks, staff supply portable washrooms through Port Stanley, Belmont, through all of the parks throughout the municipality. Typically, those are installed mid to late April and pulled the end around mid-October. So that's council's decision on what level of service it would want to provide throughout the municipality. If there's some parks it would like to, furnish these portable washrooms year round. It's really a level of service question to council on which parks would go year round.
But currently, we're not offering the service year-round. We have our arenas, we have other venues. The Councillor Griffin talked about libraries, but currently we're not having parks, which for the most part aren't used in the winter, with any sort of extra services. Is that correct?
That's correct. I believe and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, the only washroom facilities that would be available year-round would be at the arenas.
Thank you. And we have one in Belmont and we have one in Port Stanley. So are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Connors and then the Deputy Mayor, please.
Through you, Mayor, to council and Councillor Graham. So previously living in Middlesex County, there was washrooms in the parks there. Combination parks, tennis courts, baseball diamonds, soccer place. And they had a more permanent structure there. And I know that people appreciated it because it's rather out of the way when you have to go to the washroom and you have to leave the park and walk all the way home. Interested to see what the costs are here as far as portable washrooms go, et cetera, because they probably could have an application in some of the parks in the Lyndhurst area as well.
Thank you. Councillor Griffin, you have your hand up, please.
Thank you. Yes. I have at different times when I was with my kids been into parks in St. Thomas in the off season, and I've generally found their washrooms to be closed. And I'm wondering, Mr. Brooks, do you know if we have any neighboring municipalities that do keep their washrooms at their parks open year round?
Mr. Brooks, please.
Through you, Mayor Sloan. I can talk to Springbank Park in London, which I've been to, Pinafore Park. My understanding is they do have permanent washroom facilities there that are not open through the winter. I can speak to Pinafore. They do supply a porta potty year round in lieu of the building being closed through the winter months.
Thank you. Any other questions? Did you have a question? Deputy Mayor, please.
Through you, Mayor Sloan, I'm just, time is always a bit of a challenge, and when we're looking at needing a staff report for this budget, but then also we're probably not going to be able to spend that money this year because we'll have to get contractors and bids and whatnot if that's the way we go. I'm just wondering if this staff report is kind of coming at a time when staff is very busy doing our budgets and whatnot. So that, oh, apparently my mic wasn't on.
Good question from the Deputy Mayor. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, can I get a show of hands? All those in favor? Opposed? And the motion fails. Thank you. Councillor Graham, back at it. Erie Rest Beach parking.
So throughout the 2 years that I have been on council, we have had repeated incidents down at Erie Rest Beach. We're getting obviously lots of complaints from residents with the problem there. So what I'm asking for here is for staff to investigate the feasibility and costs associated with trying to resolve the difficulties that the bylaw officers are encountering down at Erie Rest Beach.
Thanks, Councillor. Do you have a seconder for your motion? Councillor Watson. Ms. Leach.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Watson. Whereas there is limited parking available at Erie Rest Beach and concerns from area residents have been raised regarding insufficient parking at the beach and illegal parking in the area. Whereas the municipality owns land west of Bartholomew Street that has been previously evaluated for the purpose of a parking lot. Now therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to investigate the feasibility and costs associated with constructing a new parking lot for Erie Rest Beach as part of the 2025 budget considerations.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. Mr. Brooks, this was on the agenda with the last council, was it not?
Yes, this came to council, I want to say 2018 or 2019.
Would you mind, sir, in giving a bit of a refresher what happened at that point and the status? Obviously, we had a parking when we first assumed our roles, there was a parking study done. So I just wanted to know what the latest information is with respect to what was done in the past and what happened then.
I don't have the full history on what exactly happened back 5 years ago. I wasn't directly involved with that parking lot. What I can tell you is staff were directed to investigate it, and ultimately that plan failed at council.
Deputy Mayor, did you have a question or a comment? I thought I saw your hand up. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
You asked my question. Thank you, Mayor.
I did. Okay, well, I'm telepathic this evening. Councillor Griffin, no hand up there. Any other questions or comments? So our motion right now is that we're going to ask staff to, would it be fair to say, reinvestigate the feasibility and costs associated with, and they're saying constructing a new parking lot. We're as part of the 2025 budget considerations. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Passes. Request for traffic impact study, George Street and William Street. Councillor Graham, you've withdrawn this? Thank you, Councillor. Number 7, Councillor Griffin, condemning the use of notwithstanding clause against charter rights of homeless Ontarians. Councillor Griffin, would you like to comment, or do you have a seconder?
Thank you, through you. I don't have a seconder unless anyone is going to do so.
Okay, Councillor Bachman's going to second. If you'd like to speak to this, Councillor.
Sure. So for background on this, for those that didn't look into it, I did send an email, but I'm not sure if everyone did look through that. There was a motion brought in Waterloo to put a bylaw in place that would allow them to clear out homeless encampments in their parks. And that went to the Superior Court of Justice, which said that it was not in keeping with the charter rights of the homeless people involved in the situation because there was no safe place to send them. On October 31st, we had a group of 13 mayors in Ontario who sent a letter to the Premier asking to use the notwithstanding clause to supersede those charter rights. And obviously, that's a real dilemma because when we see people using the notwithstanding clause to supersede charter rights, we are seeing it used to override the safety and well-being of Ontarians. So that's something that I would like to see us send a letter as a group, not just as individual councillors, although individual councillors across the province have done so, to show that we support that. Mr. Konechny from the Elmer Express did reach out to me this weekend about this, and he asked why I felt that this was an issue in a rural community where we don't routinely see homeless in our own parks, and that is true. But for me, having worked in library services, I worked very closely with them in London for many years, and something else that I think is important for us to own here in these rural communities is that I went to high school with people who have ended up living in homelessness, and although they don't end up in our parks, they do end up in parks elsewhere. They go to larger centers, but they do still need our support and they are still members of our community. So for me, I look at this and I think even when it's not happening in our own home space, it's so important that we acknowledge that homelessness begins in our community just as much as in others, and it's something that we can take responsibility for as well.
Thank you. Do I have any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none. Ms. Leach?
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Counselor Griffin, seconded by Counselor Bogman, that this council condemns in principle the use of the notwithstanding clause to suspend charter rights of homeless Ontarians, as well as the unilateral decision-making of the mayors who have made this request, and that this council affirms its commitment to evidence-based, humane, and rights-respecting solutions to address homelessness in our community and across Ontario, and that a letter reflecting these principles be circulated to Premier Doug Ford, as well as to the councils of neighboring municipalities in the county of Elgin, urging a collective commitment to upholding human rights and collaborative governance and addressing homelessness.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion fails.
Register that vote, please.
Sure. Ms. Leach?
Counselor Graham,
Yes.
Counselor Griffin,
Yes.
Counselor Watson,
No.
Counselor Connors,
No.
Counselor Bogman,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Noble,
No.
Mayor Sloan.
No.
That's defeated.
Any other business? Seeing none, sorry, Ms. Leach is, oh, I need to go back, Ms. Leach. You're giving me the aye, which means I've made a mistake. So we're going to go back here. We have one more from Counselor Graham, and it's support Stanley traffic calming. Well, sorry, Counselor Connors, I just got a flag that there was an extra one. So I'll defer now to whomever here. Have two that were taken off, but we have one that's taken off. So we're good. Counselor Connors? Or sorry, Counselor Graham? Okay. So can we get a mover and a seconder to proceed into closed? Counselor Watson, Counselor Connors.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Counselor Watson, seconded by Counselor Connors, that council proceed into closed session at 8:38 p.m. in order to address the matter pertaining to advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, a pending acquisition of land. Ooh, that's apologies. Acquisition plan subject to criteria to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality. And my apologies, that is all.
All those in favor? Opposed? And we're in closed. Thank you. Take a 5-minute recess.